I loved them dearly.
But was it love or a family web of greed that led to the death of this woman's 85-year-old husband? They call themselves Gypsies. Member of the teeny bimbo Gypsy clan are accused of marrying for profit, collecting money, cars, and expensive homes by preying on elderly victims. But did they also conspire to murder in order to get what they wanted? A few weeks ago, Sylvia Mitchell pleaded guilty to manslaughter, grand larceny, and perjury following the death of her husband, 85-year-old Andrew Vlasto. Vlasto's family believes she tricked him into marrying her and then killed him with drugs 3 months later in order to get his money. And investigators believe Mitchell has ties to the infamous teeny bimbo Gypsy clan. Members of that clan may be linked to a series of suspicious deaths in San Francisco. The bodies of 4 elderly men were exhumed there to determine if drugs may have hastened their deaths. So where are the suspects now, and are there more possible victims? Here to tell us more about Andrew Vlasto and how he got mixed up with Sylvia Mitchell is Andrew's nephew, James Vlasto. On the phone is Sylvia Mitchell's defense attorney, Arthur Gregg, and in San Francisco, Faye Farron is a private investigator who first started digging into claims against the teeny bimbo clan in San Francisco. A book has been written about her investigation called Hastened to the Grave. Welcome to all of you. Jim, let me start by saying you and I worked on this. 2020, when I was with 2020, did a piece on this. So we talked last in December 94, January 95.
That's right.
And here we are in the year 2000. Let me start by saying, what took this investigation so long?
It wasn't a high priority in New York among the district attorney's office. It's a very busy office. There are very high-profile crimes in New York. Manpower is an issue. But in the end, I think that the excellent detective work by the district attorney's office and the assistant district attorneys, and a commitment. It took a commitment from the higher echelons of the district attorney to prosecute this case.
Now, you also have continued pressure and continued your investigative efforts. You talk about their willingness to keep going. It's because it was a very intricate puzzle. Your uncle married this younger woman, a surprise to people in his family.
Yes.
Tell me about the events that led up to that and, of course, what happened thereafter.
Well, immediately when I got involved in the case in October of '93, and my uncle was in a hospital in New York, and I was not permitted to see him by his wife. And I said, "What wife?" And from that moment on, I knew there was something very bad going on here, and my priority was to try to save his life, and then eventually try to save his assets. We didn't succeed in saving his life, but we found out that he had been married a month before, 2 months before. I found out that his assets in his bank were being drained. I was able to stop most of that. But I found out that there was a whole series of events that looked like this was an organized crime, in the sense of this 26-year-old woman befriending an elderly person. And yes, we undertook our own investigation in the family. We spent a lot of time and funds to prove to the district attorney that this was a major crime and in a very important case, because the elderly are very lonely, and they become victims very quickly.
Easy victims.
Easy victims, yeah, to these people who are real clever. And I think that we were successful not only in retaining his assets, but also to prevail upon law enforcement to prosecute this case.
And watch out and pay attention for this segment of society. Let me ask you real quickly about the autopsy.
Yes.
You finally did get access, and you made sure when your uncle died that an autopsy was done. Why?
Yes, because she had control of his body as the legal wife. And fortunately, the medical examiner, at the behest of the family and the hospital, the doctors at the hospital, ordered an autopsy. She tried to stop it. And so that just gave us more ammunition and more suspicion. And then after the burial, which she controlled, we didn't have any idea where he was buried. She went into surrogate's court in New York and tried to claim the rest of his estate and his assets, and that's when we fought him.
And I want people at home to be clear, you didn't get anything out of the fight for the assets. It all went to relatives in Greece.
I was not an heir. My cousins in Greece were the heirs.
So you weren't fighting this to get your hands on money that maybe she should have had?
Not a dime.
Okay.
No.
All right, I want to bring in her attorney because, you know, Arthur, obviously this is very controversial, but she has pled guilty to manslaughter in this case. Tell me how you view that plea.
Well, she pled guilty to manslaughter in the second degree, which under New York law is technically reckless manslaughter. She took responsibility for recklessly administering prescription drugs to Mr. Vlasto. The medical and toxicology evidence showed definitely that there was barbiturates, Valium, and other types of drugs that were recklessly administered by Ms. Mitchell. However, it was always her position and was, in fact, supported by the evidence that she did not intend to kill him, that it was a negligent, reckless, somewhat ignorant, based on ignorance on her part, that caused his death.
Well, let me ask you about that, because you talk about these various prescription drugs. Had they been long-term prescription drugs, or these all been prescribed since she met and married him, which from marriage to death was 82 days?
Well, he had been prescribed Tylenol with codeine for some sort of injury, I believe, to his shoulder or arm based on a fall. He apparently had been prescribed Valium by some doctor previous. There was Valium in his household, apparently. And at some point, he was prescribed a barbiturate, some sort of phenobarbital-based drug. It was the mixture of those particular drugs, particularly the Valium, which caused him to collapse and enter into the hospital.
Okay, well, how do you account then for the autopsy findings of digoxin or digitalis, as many people have heard, Foxglove, which can essentially create a heart attack?
Let me dispute that very clearly. The autopsy was not correct. The autopsy did not find digitoxin or digoxin. In fact, the district attorney's office, to their credit, did an extensive investigation, retained Dr. Stephen Solden, who's the director of clinical chemistry at George Washington University Medical Center, one of the leading toxicologists, to do evaluations of Mr. Vlasto's heart and brain tissues. And the report that Dr. Solden sent to the district attorney's office to ADA Kim, dated September 1, 1999, states very specifically digoxin was not found in either the heart or brain tissues obtained from Mr. Vlasto.
Okay, well, let me say this, that you had actually indicated on the phone to our producer that this was the case, and please call the Manhattan DA's office, which we did this morning.
Yes.
And the Manhattan DA's information office confirmed, quote, there was evidence to support digoxin in the system.
Well, I have the actual report here from Dr. Solden.
Okay. Well,
that's what it is. Now, I believe what they're saying is that does not mean to say, because of the nature of digoxin, one of the reasons why digoxin is a controversial drug is because it's very hard to detect, and because natural death causes at death produce digoxin-like attributes. That's one of the reasons why it is a controversial drug.
Okay, well, let me ask you a couple of other questions, because you and I won't be able to resolve that. We can get medical doctors in here maybe at some point. But
I just want to correct the...
Well, I can't say that that's correcting it, because, in fact, the DA's office says there was evidence of digoxin. I don't have anybody in here, a forensic pathologist, to talk about the degree to which it would appear after death. So you and I can go back and forth, but I don't have evidence in front of me to contradict or support what you're saying. So I'd like to move on to the issue about the Teeny Bimbo clan, because in a moment I want to bring Faye into this. And the Teeny Bimbo clan, which describe themselves as gypsies, have been involved in questionable incidents in San Francisco and California as well. And I want to talk about the link. You say there is no link between Sylvia Mitchell and the Teeny Bimbo clan?
No, I never said that. What I said was that she was married to, not married to, because gypsies apparently do not have a formal marriage ceremony, but she was the companion of Ephraim Teeny Bimbo.
Okay, and in fact, she'd been living with him at least 10 years, had children with this man when she went met Andrew and married this 82-year-old man. Can you explain that? Because at least in our terms, that would be a common law marriage, which would make the second marriage invalid. What was she doing?
Well, she was not legally married, legally married to, by virtue of a marriage ceremony, and they had never resided in any common law marriage state. So legally, she was not married at the time that she married Mr. Vlasto.
Okay.
Now, I agree. Obviously, there was a long-term relationship with many children, and that's clear.
All right. And what about the assets? She did, in fact, fight to keep assets that she had gotten her hands on during the 82-day marriage.
Well, and in fact, they went to surrogate's court, and the case was settled in surrogate's court. There was a disposition where she was allowed to keep certain assets.
Okay. And ultimately, in addition to the manslaughter, she pled guilty to what?
Grand larceny and perjury.
Okay. All right, let me bring Faye Farron in here. Faye, you have spent years on these cases. Tell us about the San Francisco cases and what, if any, links you believe exist between New York and L.A. and San Francisco.
Well, it's frightening how close the two cases are linked, and it's frightening how many other cases all over the United States are perpetrated by these same people. First, let me kind of clear up the whole marriage issue. In the Gypsy culture, there is no such thing as signing our kind of certificates to to be married in our society. What they do is they have ceremonies, they declare themselves married, they are married within the Gypsy community. To try to pretend this is boyfriend and girlfriend or some kind of long-term relationship is just, silly. We've studied that.
All right, well, Faye, I'll tell you what, we're going to run out of time if we're not careful.
I'm sorry.
So that's okay. So take me to San Francisco and tell me collectively, if you can, describe the family that you investigated, the people, and what the status is of that investigation.
Okay. What basically happened here was I was brought into the case for one of the family members who had gotten himself on a joint deed of trust with an older woman. As I began to investigate, I found out that there were indeed 3 family members I was investigating and a boyfriend who basically had made a living for many years seducing old men, bringing them into relationships, cutting them off from other people, and then marrying them in some cases not, and ending up with all of their assets. Then it went a step further, and we began to get information from an informant that, in fact, Digitalis was involved, that they were poisoning the food. It turned out to be exactly the sort of thing that was happening in New York, and cousins of those people.
And in fact, now there are several people that are under indictment. And of course, bodies have been exhumed. Bodies were being exhumed when I was doing the 2020 piece with both you and Jim. And evidence of Digitalis has been found?
Exactly. And the problem there is Digitalis is the perfect drug to do this with because it cannot be detected after a number of years, or even, it is difficult to detect.
Now, what are the charges pending in California?
Right now, we have had 2 people who have settled, the kingpins of the whole thing, Angela Buford, George Lama. Angela has just gotten out of jail. They gave her time served. Basically, she pled guilty to financial abuse charges. They could not make conspiracy to commit murder because of the Digitalis problems. George Lama is still in jail. He got 8 years. He will probably be in another couple. And going to trial on the 18th of August are the other 4 remaining defendants.
Now, all of these, are you satisfied there is a link that when we talk about the Teeny Bimbo family, that both New York and California, that all of these individuals are members of the same family?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, this is a huge extended family that is all over the United States, and we don't know how many more deaths there may be by this because old people are expected to die. And so who looks into it?
And real quickly, as a result of this, you have really started a movement to pay attention to the abuse of the elderly, haven't you?
Exactly. We started a nonprofit organization called Elder Angels, and it assists victims of financial elder abuse, and not only with gypsies, but all kinds of elder abuse. All
right, I wish we had more time today. Jim Vlasto, very good to see you. Faye Farron, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Arthur Gregg, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it. Now, coming up next, get ready for warp speed. We're traveling back in